Coming up next on the Union Label is the continuation of our conversation with J.R. Gray. Let's pick up with the two pieces of legislation I'm talking about before, right to work and prevailing wage. Explain to the viewers exactly what a right to work law is.
Well, a right to work law, the term sounds good. Everyone should have a right to work. And of course, I put a little different slant on it. I say, yes, they should have a right to work, but they should have a right to work in a union environment where that everyone who is there pays their fair share of the cost of the union contract being negotiated and enforced and all that. And that's my version of right to work. Essentially, I think it's in the Taft-Hartley Act, if I'm not mistaken. There was a provision put in that law, if I remember correctly, is Section 14B.
That's correct.
And Section 14B of that act said it was up to the individual states with regard to have or not have provisions to compel people to belong to a union that worked in a particular workplace. And I've forgotten the number now, but for a long time it was about 20 states that were considered right to work states, and the numbers may have increased a little bit since then. But at any rate, put it down simple, if you and I are working in the same shop and I'm permitted to refrain from paying union dues and you're paying your dues, we got a good wage rate, we got good benefits and everything else, then I'm being a freeloader on your back.
And under federal law, the union has to represent the non-union worker in everything.
If there appears to be a violation of a union contract, whether a person belongs to that union or whether they don't, if they have a grievance, then the union is under an obligation to make a very, very fair evaluation of the situation. And if there is a ground, or if there are grounds there, for a legitimate complaint, the union must process that complaint, not only to the extent of running it through the grievance procedure and then to arbitration if necessary, but even beyond that, if it became the basis for a charge before the National Labor Relations Board, the union would have to go and represent that employee before the Labor Relations Board. Or I guess if it became a situation where that litigation was necessary to get rightful treatment for that employee, then the union would have to hire legal representation for him as well. So it's a total misnomer. The proponents of it, they tout it as being a way of creating jobs. Right to work laws have never created one job anywhere. There's one thing that creates jobs, and that's people that's going out there and talking to the people that are looking for a location and convincing those people to come in and then working with the community to make sure that the jobs happen. So it's a total misnomer. It's a tool for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the individual state chambers of commerces, and the locals. It's a tool to keep unions weak if they possibly can.
Explain the prevailing wage also to people who don't know what that is.
I'm not the real, I guess you'd say, expert on prevailing wage, but essentially it was an act that was passed to make sure that people working on public works jobs, it could be the building of a campus here, like this, it could be a new building on it, that those jobs pay a rate that is at least the average rate that exists in the different communities throughout the state and so forth like that. It's again another way. It's kind of like minimum wage in a sorts, because your minimum wage seeks to elevate everyone to a certain point. The prevailing wage deals principally with construction people and tries to make sure that they get a fair payment in the way of salaries for the work that they perform. It applies to road work, anything that that the state does that has to do with public funds. The same with cities, municipalities, counties. It filters on down the line, and there's a threshold on it. I can't recall the exact threshold now, but it seems to me like it's somewhere maybe between $250,000 and $50,000 or $500,000. That if a project is going to exceed that level, then the prevailing wage laws must apply. The smaller jobs, they do not.
Well, going back to our previous interview, you began with the union movement with no experience. You began your political career with no experience.
Correct.
So how does one start a political career without experience?
Barry, I guess that the way I'd answer that was that I had developed a reputation, in my opinion, I had developed a reputation throughout my years with the union work of being a fighter for what I thought was the right thing to do. And when 1975 rolled around and I made a decision to run for that office, first of all, I had the full support of my family, my wife, my kids, members of her family, and people I gathered up from all over, were in full support of me running for it. They thought that, I would do the job that they wanted done. But the experience that I had gained throughout the years of working for the machinist union, I had built up a reputation for honesty, integrity, hard work, this type of thing. Excuse me. And the people evidently believed what I told them, and I would work just as hard to represent them in Frankfort in the halls up there as I worked to, for them here locally as the union representative for the machinists. And I bought into it. They bought into it, and they rewarded me with a job. I was thinking earlier this morning, I've been blessed in so many ways that, it's unreal. And somebody might say, looking at the political arena and some of the things that I've been through, that maybe it wasn't too big a blessing, but I viewed it as such because I gained a lot of experience with it. The other thing, too, that gets down to what does it take to be, halfway successful in the political arena, you must have the help of other people who are your colleagues in that particular legislative body, whatever it might be. And you have to make sure that they know that you want to do a good job and would like to have their help, and they will help you. I had that exact same thing happen here. When I first got elected, I had some of the more seasoned members of the House of Representatives that came to me, and essentially they said, now, JR, we probably can't support everything that you might advocate, but there is one thing we can do for you. We can give you our advice as to how you can go about passing your bills, or on the other hand, if it's something that needs to be defeated, we can help you with, tips on how to defeat a bill. And I'll have to say they were all as good as their word. They stuck with me.
Who were some of your early advisees, or advisors, I should say?
I guess in this area, principally going forward, I guess that Representative Lloyd Clapp.
From Graves County for years.
And Representative Fred Morgan.
Of Paducah for years.
They both took me under their wings and said, well, here's what we'll do. We'll help you any way we can. And they were just as good as their word. I can, of course, Representative Clapp still living. I consider him to be an excellent friend. I always considered Representative Morgan to be an excellent friend, and think the world of his sons, that.
Well, tell us about the Tombstone Bill.
That was a good one. It was the first bill that I had ever introduced, and I guess I had beginner's luck again, but at any rate, the bill was brought to me by someone else. Well, Representative Morgan. It was a bill he was interested in, but he thought it might pose a little conflict of interest if he were to introduce it himself. And he told me that if I would be willing to introduce it, that he thought it might pass quite readily, and that at the right time, he would offer his comments on it. So we went through the committee process and everything, and it was a bill to exempt the sales tax on tombstones and other memorial grave markers, or maybe just said other memorial markers. I've forgotten now. That's been 1976. But at any rate, I thought it sounded like a reasonable bill, a fair bill, something that you could give a little comfort to a bereaved family when they had lost a family member and not have to pay state sales tax on a marker to put up out there to honor their family member. So we went through the committee process and all the hearings, and we listened to the amount of money it was going to take away from the state treasury, from the chairman of the Appropriation and Revenue Committee. And at any rate, it passed the committees and went to the floor of the House, and I never will forget, I'm sure that if the microphone was sensitive enough, you could have heard my knees knocking back at Possum Trot, because it was my first bill I'd ever introduced and was speaking on. And I made my little talk on it, kind of similar to some of the comments I made before about honoring a bereaved family. And I said, now I would like to yield to the gentleman from McCracken 3 for further comments. So Representative Morgan took the microphone, and he has a great oratory voice, and he made some general comments about it, and I'll never forget his final comments on it, which were, ladies and gentlemen of the House, it's been said in Kentucky that we tax people from the womb to the tomb. And I submit to you, it's about time that we take it off the tomb. And the bill passed by a large majority, went on through the Senate, and became law. So,
who was a House Speaker back then?
I guess that was Norbert. No, wait a minute. I think Norbert had gotten. I guess it was Bill Kenton.
Bill Kenton.
Yeah.
I remember. Of course, he was a great big
boom boom.
Boom boom. Did he get that because he was just a big guy and had the big gavel?
Big guy, and he also had a pretty outgoing voice, kind of like Representative Morgan did.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. What was the story of that great big gavel? Just because he's a great big man?
I suppose that was it. A little philosophy behind it. If I got a bigger hammer to swing, that maybe I can get the House to come to order, which I'll say, by the way, and I contributed to it as well. The House could become quite disorderly from time to time, and you'd really have to make a lot of noise to get their attention to get them back to business. So,
our son was made a page. He was Fred Nessler's page for a day back when he was in high school, and what fascinated me was it just seemed to be this just chaos down there, and Speaker Stumbo would have to wield the gavel.
Oh yeah.
But what I also was telling my son, I was telling my wife, we were talking. I said, it's not necessarily chaos, because you can see people walking around lining up support for bills. I mean, it's not really chaos. It looks to be, but you can see people moving around doing
It's somewhat organized chaos.
Organized chaos, yeah. In the legislature, lots of funny things happen from time to time, I know, and a story you told me a few years ago was about a representative from Louisville who you had a little fun with. Tell that story, if you would.
It was I don't know what year this was, I can't recall that, but it was on during the latter days of the session when various breaks were being taken for various committees to meet and come back and report back so we could vote on another bill. And this gentleman, he was great at clowning. So every time that one of these breaks had come up, he'd go up and he'd grab that big gavel and he'd pretend to be speaker, you know, and cut up and go on like that. And one of my seatmates, I told him, I said, let's see if we can have a little fun out of him. He said, okay, what do you got in mind? I sat down there and I wrote out a note. And it said, Representative Hellringer, we are some of your constituents who have been in the gallery tonight observing your behavior and your clowning. We feel like it's about time that we elect someone who will put the clowning aside and settle down to business and give us the representation that we are entitled to. And then put on the bottom of it, a concerned voter / constituent. So I managed to get that note delivered to his desk. And of course, two or three of us were watching his reaction out of the corners of our eyes, you know, like this. He came back in, he picked up that note, he read it, he jerked his head up and he looked the gallery over on this side, on that end, on that side, trying to spot a familiar face. And he couldn't spot one. So he abruptly, ran out of the House chamber and ran up into the gallery, and he circled it about twice looking for a familiar face. He couldn't find one. So finally, the person that I had kind of convinced to deliver the message to him, he came back to them and he said, who was that? Who brought that note there? I said, oh, I don't know. He said, I can't remember. He said, about 3 pretty good-sized guys wearing suits, you know. And he said, dark suits. And he said, they just asked me if I'd hand the note to you or give you the note. And he said, I don't know if I'd even know him if I saw him again, you know, this type of thing. He then went out and he tried to buttonhole every guy he saw with a dark suit on that he thought might be a party to it. And we were sitting down there just splitting our sides, you know, laughing at him, you know. And,
yeah.
But, you know, the upside of that story is I think he took the note to heart, even though it was a fictitious note, because his behavior kind of calmed down quite a bit.
That was it, Bob Hellringer?
Yeah.
Yeah, from Louisville. Yeah. And again, that's just, again, going back to when you first got up there, were you kind of in awe of it? I mean, you go into this chamber, and it's a beautiful chamber, and you're this kid from, relatively speaking, from deep western Kentucky, and here you're up in the state capitol. That had to be sort of awe-inspiring, I guess.
It was. You know, and I guess the thing that, and I was never a great student of government when I was in school, but what I guess brought about the awe and everything to it is that if you count up nationwide, I think there's only about 750 state legislators for the whole United States. You know?
Absolutely.
And I'm sitting there thinking, well, here I am, 1 out of 750 people that are privileged to have been elected to a seat of this nature. Now, I have a great responsibility resting on my shoulders to do as best I can determine what's in the best interest of those 40,000 people that I represent back home in my district. And I'm trying to never lose sight of that, you know, never let that thought get too far from me, because that was where my obligations were, and that's where I knew I had to deliver right there.
Now, you said you were elected the first time in '75.
Right.
I believe that was the year Julian Carroll was elected governor, wasn't it?
It was.
Our first and only Jackson Purchase governor.
Yeah.
Did you know him before?
I had met him. So far as actually knowing him, I did not. I got to know him during the time that the campaign was going on. If you'll recall correctly, that was when Wendell Ford got elected United States Senator and moved to Washington. And Julian was serving as the lieutenant governor, had about a year and a half, no, not that long, about a year left in his term. And he assumed the governorship at that point in time. And I'll never forget it, although the word endorsement was never used. He did everything but endorse me in my first race, because he felt like I could do good.
Mm-hmm. Now, he had a union background too. Was his dad an operating engineer? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, he, of course, when you think of orators, boy, Julian Carroll, I mean, he can still belt it out. He's got this ringing, booming voice.
Yeah. And if he decides he wants to take someone on, it's kind of like taking the skin off of an onion. He knows how to do it.
He does. He does. He does. And of course, the fact he's a state senator, that's kind of unusual for a governor to become a state senator.
Yeah.
Other speakers you knew, of course, Jody Richards for years.
Right. Jody and I were elected the same year.
He was kind of a low-key guy, wasn't he, more than Kenton or even Stumbo?
Yeah, I would say that is probably correct. And I would say, too, and it's not intended as criticism, Jody could become rattled, for lack of a better expression, a little bit faster maybe than some of the others could as well. Gosh, I forget who all I did serve under.
But he was the longest serving speaker, I believe, in Kentucky history. Jody Richards was.
Could very well be,
so.
Yeah.
Well, what, in your opinion, from being a committee chair and a veteran lawmaker, what makes a good speaker?
It's about like being what makes a good legislator, what makes a good committee chair. It all kind of comes together in the same way. Number one, you've got to be a good listener. As speaker, you have to listen to the 99 other legislators as to what their priorities are and what their concerns are, and how that you may be able to work with them to accomplish their particular goals. You have to be good at, as we kind of alluded to that a while ago about the floor getting kind of rowdy at times. You have to be a good parliamentarian. Of course, they have parliamentarians on staff, in case a question comes up that a speaker doesn't know the immediate answer to, and usually a recess call, and they go over it and decide what the course of action has to be. That could come under either reading of the section of the Constitution or reading a section of Mason's Manual, which is the operating parliamentary manual that we use in the House.
Because Robert's Rules of Order is what you hear about, but this is called Mason's Manual.
Mason's Manual, and it's specifically for legislative bodies.
Huh. What did they use it in other states too?
To my knowledge, yes. I think it's pretty much the
standard thing.
Yeah, I guess you'd say the predominant guide that is used. Your speaker has to remain in close contact with the members at all times. And of course, if there is an agenda out there that the governor has, and obviously, a Democratic governor and Democratic speaker should be on the same pages at least 90% of the time. It's part of the speaker's responsibility to try to help round up votes for the bill that the governor is trying to get through. One
thing, too, on that topic, I've always heard that about the time John Y. Brown became governor, that's when you really begin to see legislative independence. That in the old days, the legislature pretty well did what the governor wanted if it was of his party.
Yeah.
You agree with that that's when legislative independence started?
Pretty much, yes. In fact, I can recall when I first got up there, we would receive a list at our desk each day of the bills that we should support if we can, and the ones that we should be opposed to, unless there was some problem with it. And that was generated by messages from the governor's office.
And that went back years in Kentucky history. That's the way it was done.
Yeah.
Way back, yeah.
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 And I never will forget, you know, there was always a couple of times that something came up that the Governor Carroll wanted that I just didn't feel comfortable in supporting it. And of course, when that happened, I just simply went to the governor's office and asked for an audience with the governor. And I said, "Now, Governor, I know you're interested in this, but I've got some problems with it, and here's why." You know, I don't think I ever ran into any problems from the governor as a result of doing that. He said, "I understand. I know you can't be with us all the time. We appreciate your help," and that'd be about it.
Well, what do you think it was about the Brown administration that caused the legislature to just kind of do that?
Well, in my opinion, Governor Brown just did not want to get into that daily hands-on
That's the
work,
impression I would have gotten, yeah.
you know, in passing or killing bills. He leaned more heavily on the Democratic leadership to handle those issues, and him not have to really become involved with them. I guess you could say, in a nice sort of a way, he was sloughing off on the elected Democratic leadership.
Well, we are about out of time. We've got about a minute and a half left. Do you have any final comments you would like to make?
Yeah, Barry, first of all, I appreciate this opportunity. It's been a great discussion. It's caused me to reminisce and think back on things of the past, you know, developments that have gone on. And speaking of developments, under Governor Paul Patton, the community college here became part of the University of Kentucky system. Some people still disagree with that.
You mean left the UK system?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And some people still do not agree with the legislation that was passed on it. I had a pretty strong disagreement here with an individual in the auditorium during we had a public hearing on it.
I remember it. I was there.
And couldn't please him, so at any rate, as I committed to him, was, you know, I'll listen to all the arguments and everything on it. When the time comes to vote, I'm going to vote in the way that I think is in the best interest of the system, in the best interest of the people and the students and all. And, you know, I think things have come a long ways since that. And I'd like to offer my thanks and my congratulations to starting with President Veazey and working all the way down through. Of course, I've always known you for, you know, a great number of years. My good friend Gerald Watkins, I've known him for a great number of years, and I know all of you have given your all, given your support to the community college here, all the way down to the newest employee. And I just simply say that it's a job well done. I congratulate everyone on it. And I really don't think that we came out second in the United States. I think they made a mistake there sometime. We were supposed to be the #1 community college in the United States. So thank you and all the employees and staff.
I think I'm safe to say to accept thanks from all of us on that one. So hope you can come back in and we can talk some more.
I'll do it. Sounds
My
good.
guest today was J.R. Gray. I'm Barry Craig. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.